A pedigree is a diagram that traces a specific trait through a few generations. Most of the time, pedigrees are used to follow certain genetic disorders through a family. The pedigree can show how affected and unaffected individuals in a family are related by their relation and sex, and then conclude how genetic disorder is passed on and the probability of an offspring having said genetic disorder. By observing the information shown on a pedigree, someone may identify as a carrier. This information, obtained by the pedigree, is useful because it can alert parents of the chance that they may have an offspring who is affected by the genetic disorder. Knowing this fact may cause parents to reject the idea of pregnancy and adopt instead. The pedigree technique is important because it can alert a family of their possible future. This pedigree is showing the trait of hair shape throughout this family. Hair shape, in simple terms, can be straight, curly, or wavy. By looking at the pedigree, it appears that the trait of wavy hair is inherited by incomplete dominance. This means that the heterozygous phenotype of wavy hair is an intermediate phenotype between the two homozygous phenotypes of straight and curly hair. First, let's assign letters to the traits. 2 capital H's is curly hair, 2 lowercase h's is straight hair, and a capital H and a lowercase h is wavy hair. So, if an individual inherits an allele from one parent with homozygous curly hair, and an allele from another parent with homozygous straight hair, then the individual would have the heterozygous genotype with a capital H and a lowercase h, and their phenotype would be in the middle of the curly and straight hair, so hair of the individual would be wavy hair. If we look at individual generation 2-3 and individual generation 2-4 on the family pedigree, both of the parents have wavy hair. Therefore, it is safe to assume that the genotype of both of the parents is the heterozygous capital H lowercase h. If a Punnett square is filled out for the two individuals, the resulting offspring are 25% homozygous curly with 2 capital H's, 50% heterozygous wavy with a capital H and a lowercase h, and 25% homozygous straight with 2 lowercase h's. Individual generation 2-3 and individual generation 2-4 have 3 offspring, and all of their phenotypes and genotypes accurately represent this data. Individual generation 3-3 has curly hair, and therefore her genotype would be 2 capital H's. Individual generation 3-4 and individual generation 3-5 both have wavy hair, and therefore would have the genotype capital H lowercase h. When looking at the pedigree, these 3 families of parents and offspring follow the incomplete dominance inheritance. However, it appears that these 3 families do not. According to On-Land Mendelian Inheritance in Man, in 1908, a study was performed by Davenport and Davenport regarding the Mendelian inheritance of hair morphology on 230 Caucasian families. The studies found that straight hair was recessive to curly hair, and that wavy hair may be a heterozygous condition. This information validates the initial analysis of the incomplete dominance inheritance that is present for 3 of the families. Another study was also performed in 1911 by Bean that found different conclusions. Bean found that straight hair may be a dominant trait, but that hair morphology also did not follow a simple Mendelian inheritance. If straight hair can act dominant, then that would explain these 2 families. In this family, either individual generation 2-1 or individual generation 2-2 could have a recessive trait for curly hair that only appeared when their daughter was born with wavy hair. The same principle applies to this family, where individual generation 1-3 had a recessive trait for curly hair, and that trait did not show up until his son was born with curly hair. In 1964, Roston and Tetry claimed that curly hair was dominant to straight hair, except when the trait is semi-dominant when heterozygous offspring are born with wavy hair. This experiment validates the final family. Individual generation 2-5 may have had a recessive trait for straight hair that showed up in his daughter, individual generation 3-7. The 3 experiments have varying data, so it appears that the trait of hair shape does not follow simple Mendelian inheritance. Every individual on the pedigree was tested, so let's use incomplete dominance to discuss the probable phenotypes of the parents of several individuals who are not shown on the pedigree. First, let's look at individual generation 2-6. This individual has wavy hair, which means that she inherited a curly allele from one parent and a straight allele from the other. There are many possibilities for the phenotypes of her parents. She could have 2 homozygous parents, one with curly hair and the other with straight hair. She could have 2 heterozygous parents, both with wavy hair. She could have 1 homozygous parent with curly hair and 1 heterozygous parent with wavy hair. Or she could have 1 homozygous parent with straight hair and 1 heterozygous parent with wavy hair. Basically, the parents of individual generation 2-6 could have any phenotypes except for them both being homozygous curly or both homozygous straight. Individual generation 2-1 and individual generation 3-1 both have straight hair. Their parents could be homozygous for straight hair, one parent could be homozygous for straight hair and the other parent could be heterozygous with wavy hair, or both parents could be heterozygous with wavy hair. Anyways, hair morphology does not seem to follow simple Mendelian inheritance. Sometimes straight is dominant, sometimes curly is dominant, and sometimes neither is dominant, and wavy hair results if an individual is heterozygous. A possible source of error may be that some of the information collected was incorrect. When gathering information, some family members had to remember the hair shape of a relative. However, if that relative always does their hair differently than the actual shape that they have, then the person who is remembering may give the wrong information. In some cases, the hair shape someone had changed as they grew older. One may have had curly hair when they were younger, but developed wavy hair as they aged. When putting the information into the pedigree, the wrong trait may have been selected for that individual.